Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Lindsay Anderson, and I'm on the executive leadership team of the CIO Symposium. We live in a changing, evolving world. Boards and CIOs are looking for their organizations to become more strategically agile. That is why strategic agility is the focus of this afternoon's panel. Our moderator is Barry Woolfield, Managing Director of Technology at Accenture. Barry will introduce the panel and the panelists.
Perfect. Thank you, Lindsay. This is my second year hosting a talented panel of CIOs, and I'm thrilled to be here again this year. And I'm looking at a great audience out here as well. As Lindsay mentioned, I'm a managing director in Accenture's technology practice and have had the fortunate time of getting to work with many CIOs over the last few years and working with them on their strategy, on how they're going to bring strategic agility through IT to their businesses. Before we get started with some questions, I'm going to give the panelists each a brief minute or two, or maybe three, to introduce themselves and also share something to get us started about the biggest opportunity or something they've done in bringing strategic agility through IT to their organization. And I'll start here with Tony.
Thank you so much, Barry. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for being here. My name is Tony Casillas. I am the CIO of Haemonetics. Haemonetics is a world leader in blood management systems. Probably most of you have never heard of blood management. What we do is we make devices, software, and we provide services that allow folks to manage the supply chain of blood from the arm of the donor to the arm of the patient. It's a very unique industry. We're about a $1 billion company this year. About 4,000 employees in 25 sites worldwide. We have all the complexity of a large pharmaceutical company, but nowhere near the size. So it makes for a very exciting challenge. And with regard to some opportunities around being agile in the business, when I first came to Haemonetics, it was about 2 years ago, I got a call from the CFO of the company, and he asked if he wanted to come to my office. Now, for those of you who are aware of what it's like in an executive corporate setting, it's very rare that the CFO will come to your office. But he insisted on doing so. And he came in and he said, look, we have an opportunity to acquire a large asset, a carve-out of a company, but we have to execute the deal and get it completed within 6 months. Do you think you can actually do it? And the answer was yes. I don't know how today, but we will. And we began a process of acquiring that asset, about $250 million worth of products in the whole blood business, into the Haemonetics Corporation, essentially from a standstill, really working 4 months straight, providing systems and capability for that team. So it was a really unique opportunity for us to really work quickly and work directly with the senior leadership of the company.
Great. Thank you, Tony. Mojgan?
My name is Mojgan Lefebvre, and I'm the CIO of Liberty Mutual Global Specialty. Liberty Mutual is an insurance company, and Global Specialty is a specialized type of insurance that many of you potentially don't buy. We sell insurance to commercial organizations who actually want to buy insurance on top of the P&C, the property and casualty insurance that they need. So anything from insurance for their directors and officers, or excess insurance, or insurance for gas turbines, or very large constructions. So for example, for the September 11th incident, we had a huge hit because that was one of the buildings that we insured. In terms of IT and the areas where we have opportunities to be agile, one of them is that within Global Specialty, which is an $8 billion business globally for us, operating out of 16 countries, we're in the process of actually launching a whole new product line called Accident and Health. Today we have 0 revenues, and our plan is that we're going to grow this to $1 billion in the next 2 to 3 years. We have no platforms for this, as it's a very different product line than everything else that we have. And so within the next 2 to 3 years, we have to set up everything from sales and marketing to underwriting to policy administration, claims, and everything that goes with that. So I think that's an area where we can show agility.
Great. Thank you. Bill?
Yeah, thank you. Glad to be here this afternoon. It's a real pleasure. I'm the CIO of Broadcom Corporation. We're the leading communications semiconductor company in the world today. And I thought I'd give you a little flavor for the company and the challenges that I deal with as the CIO. We're about an $8 billion enterprise today, and we're what I would consider to be one of the most innovative companies on the planet. Last year, we spent almost $2 billion on R&D. So the creation of intellectual property is really what we're all about today. We hold a patent portfolio of about 18,000 patents, which is pretty substantial for the semiconductor world. And our products really are aimed at connecting everything that can be connected. You may have read one of the interesting statistics about the company that 99.98% of voice data and video traffic move across one of our chips at any given time. It's really quite remarkable. I would guess that everybody in the room here probably owns several Broadcom chips and is not aware of it. You have them in your set-top box at home to communicate, to get your TV signals in with. You have them in your DSL or cable modem routers at your house. You invariably have GPS, Wi-Fi, or Bluetooth chips on your handheld devices, and if you've got a laptop, probably the Ethernet components are driven by Broadcom semiconductors. So it's a company, we have about 11,000 employees, 77% of them are engineers, 900 of the engineers are PhDs, so it is a very, very innovation-rich business. My job is to connect all of those people, right, and to keep them maximally productive. With quite a few of those engineers in California, they're very high-priced individuals. My goal is to keep them productive at all times, right? Downtime in engineering is a bad thing. So as an IT CIO in a high-tech company, we really try to make sure that those people have the tools and resources to continue to innovate and develop new products. So a couple of key areas of focus for me in terms of agility and delivering agility. Design tools, the grid, the design software that's available around the globe for these engineers to simulate and develop their circuits. Very important. It has to be there all the time. They have to be able to collaborate. The engineering teams are global. We've done 50 acquisitions, and we have pockets of engineers across the planet. They have to come together to deliver useful silicon to a customer in a timely fashion. So they have to be able to collaborate, and perhaps most importantly, they have to be able to effectively share intellectual property. So our core central IP libraries for our devices have to be available and reusable to engineers no matter where they sit. We don't want to pay them and cut into schedule time to reproduce IP that's been produced somewhere else in the corporation. So my goal is to enable that, empower that, network that, and connect those resources. So a lot of fun, fantastic job.
Great, thank you, Bill. Mike.
My name is Mike Relic. I'm the global CIO for Guess, and I also have responsibility for global logistics. Like Bill said, every one of you probably has a Broadcom chip at your house. Now I'm hoping that you all have a pair of Guess jeans in your closet. But Guess is a global lifestyle brand. I've been in retail for my whole career, retail IT, 9 years at Guess, and 9 years is a long time for a CIO. When I started there, the company was $600 million, and about 98% of its revenue came from North America. Since I've been there, we've grown to $2.7 billion, and about over half of our revenue comes from abroad. So you can imagine the challenges of actually trying to create platforms and infrastructure in IT to grow the business.
Perfect.
And the thing that actually, my biggest not challenge, but I think the biggest opportunity, I guess, is as we've grown, we have designers that are dispersed around the globe. We have a design center in Florence, a design center in LA, designers in Seoul, Korea, and we have sourcing operations in those locations. And so really to bring collaboration platforms to tie all these people together and also provide them, take the data we have, convert it to information, and so they have the information they need to make the proper decisions.
Great, thank you, Mike. We as a group of panelists met earlier in the afternoon and just to get acquainted and get to know each other a bit. And the general comment was we come from very, very different industries except myself. But the four of them, everything from life sciences to insurance to high technology and retail. So quite a diverse panel. We're going to jump around a bit with questions. We have a couple themes we're going to follow. I'm going to ask each panelist a question, and the others will have a chance to chime in and offer their other opinions as well. But we're also going to leave a lot of time at the end, a good 20 minutes or so for the audience. So I encourage you all to think in advance of any questions you might want to have for this esteemed group of CIOs, so we'd appreciate your participation as well. They've all seen the questions I'm about to ask them. They haven't seen the questions that you might have for them, so those questions might be a bit more interesting as well.
So don't be shy about those questions.
Yes, please, please. The first group of questions is around the CIO agenda and the topic of strategic agility and how each of them make IT strategic to their business. We've heard a lot about this today. I sat through some of the morning sessions and about how does IT stay relevant. The first question is what is the role of IT in fostering business innovation, and how do you incorporate social, market, and industry trends into your technology strategy? So I'm going to start the first one with Tony.
Well, say it again?
Sure. What is the role of IT in fostering business innovation?
Yes, fostering business innovation.
Yes.
In our company, we have a basis engineering company. We build machines, software, and we build solutions. So we have a real need to ensure that all of our team members are working efficiently, locally and globally. And so for us, it's about getting people connected. We have a lot of staff members that are in small cells, either in foreign countries, perhaps over in France, in Germany, and some members are also in California, and they all produce different components and pieces of our engineering activity. So what we try to do is get all of our members together and be able to collaborate by virtue of the technologies such as video conferencing. We also try to create application solutions that allow them to share some of the deep engineering pieces of their drawing techniques, some of the components that they put together for the blood management systems, and essentially trying to make sure we get them connected within their environments.
Perfect. Anybody else want to share something on that?
Yeah, so for us, we don't necessarily see innovation necessarily having to come from IT, although it can, of course. But I think we have to be sure that we're close enough to the business, understand what the opportunities are so that we can respond and provide the solutions. So one of the most important things for us is, first of all, the way we're organized is we're a federated IT model, so the IT and the business sit together, and so all of the discussions around planning and operational reviews and so on happen together. And as we set up our initiatives and programs for any sort of transformation, for example, a claims transformation project, we ensure that we've got both people on the business side and on the IT side that are truly accountable for that. And so one example was a claims analytics initiative that we had where in the span of 6 months with a group who were truly working very closely together in a very agile manner, we developed an analytics tool that actually ended up winning Business and Technology, Insurance Business and Technologies Innovation Award, and it was about using psychosocial factors to predict those claims that looked benign on the surface to the claims handlers, but could potentially become really very expensive over time. And so even the ability to save 1% of the $5 billion that we pay out on workers' comp on an annual basis was a huge savings from this. So really staying close to the business, I would say.
Great. Bill, Mike?
Yeah, I just think, first of all, let me say, I think we're onto something. I think we're going to put a chip in the genes and come up with connected genes. We got an idea.
That's a good idea, yeah.
We'll talk about this after the meeting.
A read startup.
I think there's something here, the wearable chip. Yeah. But in terms of innovation and fostering innovation, we basically try to provide tools and environments that make the engineers maximally productive, so they don't spend a lot of time in energy recreating or setting up their own environments or establishing new tool sets and frameworks. Bug tracking tools, configuration management tools, all of the frameworks that an engineer would operate in, we try to provide that in a seamless fashion so they're all using similar tools and communicating in similar fashions. The other things that are important here with a global workforce of technologists, allowing them to self-organize around new chip and new engineering initiative development. So there are new technologies coming out, technologies that are more on the social side. If you look at technologies like Jabber and Yammer and tools that allow these communities to kind of self-assemble and organize and share information in short order and include the people they need to include and then disassemble when they're done, I think that's a highly productive way of operating, and we want to continue to push the envelope on that. And I want to move IT out of the middle of enabling those organizations and allow them to self-assemble, but to do it in a responsible and secure and cyber-aware way. So we continue to look at that from a fostering innovation standpoint.
Great.
And so, I mean, I work in a different organization where we don't have the most technical people. You know, we have designers, they're creative. We have buyers, they're creative. And they're not going to knock on our door and ask us for technology. Sometimes they'll be technology averse. But the way we handle it is I make sure in my team that they're very, very business oriented and they understand the business. And they've all worked in the industry a long time and really, really know the industry as well as the users. And then we are actively talking to my counterparts, my other CIOs in the retail industry, and looking for innovation. And we're actually presenting it to them. And you know, because we have a strong relationship with our users, it makes the adoption a little easy. And we try not to, we try to, you know, how would you think, simplify things. So we've actually embraced the iPad and iOS quite a bit because it's a platform that our buyers and our designers and merchants feel very comfortable with. And by combining rich analytics with, you know, with pictures and visuals, it makes it a very, very easy platform to actually gain information with. And our adoption is very high with that.
Great, thank you. So all of you shared great stories around how you foster innovation in the business, how you collaborate with the business and also within IT. We've seen in the last 2 years, when we talk to our CIOs and we help them with their annual budgeting process, a shift from cost to revenue growth, which is a great change and refreshing, I'm sure, for all of you to know what can you do to help me grow the business versus how can you help me cut 5% of our, of our operating costs. So the question I'd have is, does your board of directors have a technology-aware business vision, and does IT have a clear role in driving business growth? And I'm going to shift one down and start with Mojgan.
I'd say that in our industry, given that really we don't manufacture gadgets or clothing, or all we deal with is information. And based on information, we decide what our pricing should be, what risk we should take on, and really how we should interact with the customer. So we have no choice but to be very information technology savvy, and it literally lives within every business unit and every domain that we have. As such, I would say every business strategy and every business plan that's put together has the assumption that the information technology is there to support it. And so with every business plan, there is an IT roadmap hand in hand that goes with it that supports the ability to deliver to that business plan. So I would say that yes, they do. Now, obviously then as the IT leaders and the IT team, it's our job to make sure that what they're thinking is realistic, and as they put the plans together, that may count on analytics and capabilities to do things that the timelines that they have in mind are realistic. But I'd say that yes.
Good, good.
Yeah, I would say our board is very tech savvy, obviously being a kind of just coming out of that startup company phase over the last couple of years. They're technologists themselves, and they understand the value proposition. Kind of our IT solution delivery, we're cost effective in many ways, and statistically when we look at our spend profile, it's fairly conservative for a tech company, but we're a little bit more like a NASCAR race car. You know, there's not a lot of leather and fancy interior woodwork, but there's a whole lot under the engine, right? So the deal is, if you need tools to make engineers productive, we're not going to take high-priced West Coast engineering talent and give them an inexpensive PC, right? Because that just doesn't make any sense from a value proposition. So we try to put the money and the resources into the design tools and into the technology environment, and not a lot of other trappings in general in the IT space. And that's a conscious effort we go through in the budgeting effort each year to figure out where those investments should be made to still manage spend, but actually direct spend where it's most profitable.
Great.
Actually, you know, our board consists of a lot of, you know, of retailers and such, and they're not the most tech-savvy board, but the good thing is they understand the importance of IT. And just, you know, it's illustrative of the fact that I'm actually an executive vice president and a Section 16 officer, which is, you know, isn't very common for a retailer. You know, usually it's Phil of merchants and CFO. So that shows the support they give. And sometimes actually in board meetings I've been scolded for not spending enough. which it sounds kind of interesting, but then, on the other hand, if you spend too much, then they yell at you for that.
Interesting. Interesting. Tony, anything to add?
Yeah, just a couple things. So because of the way in which our business runs, that we have a software development in 3 different areas. We have embedded software systems that run our machines, so they control all of our small microprocessor and chips. We have another software group that writes software for the hospitals and the folks that actually take blood out of donors. And then we have the software group that runs the enterprise. There's those 3 aspects of our group. We have board members that are very familiar with software technology and systems that are used to run blood management. And so because of that, they're very software aware and very keenly aware as how those products relate to the overall top line and bottom line of the organization. We're growing a lot of our work in the hospital management systems, and so that's a big area of growth for us. So they're very aware of technology, its impact on the top line, and it's very important for them to make sure that we're achieving our goals there.
Awesome. No, excellent, excellent. Good answers all around. And again, it's refreshing to see the shift in focus away from cost, although I'm sure cost is there. And I'm sure the budgeting cycle is still a painful negotiating process on an annual basis. We used to always encourage our clients to try and bring one big idea to the board, right? Come up with something completely out there, right? Maybe it was somebody who brought telematics to the insurance industry, so we can put a device in the car, right? But it was interesting to just challenge your teams with what's a big idea that the board of directors might want to hear about, even if it might never come to realization. Have any of you had any of those kind of aha moments where you came up with that big idea that you got to bring up to the board of directors?
Not at the board level.
Not at the board level, okay. Just kind of putting it out there.
Well, I'd say to the executive committee. So you said telematics. Obviously, telematics has been in the insurance industry for a while.
Yeah.
But we actually happen to have our own fleet of automobiles that, while we were using telematics with our customers, we didn't know, what the profile of the drivers of our own fleet was. And so it's actually a project that's ongoing right now, which we funded after the budget cycle.
Sure.
And so that's one that wasn't on the map, and now it's on the roadmap and looks very promising. We're going to have much more information about our own fleet of cars.
Perfect. Going to shift gears with the second group of questions around agility and how each of you keep pace with the demands of the business. Question about IT operating model. Is your IT operating model nimble, flexible, and adaptive enough to take advantage of the pace of change, emerging technologies within your organization? And we'll start with Bill on this one.
Yeah, I mean, I think you can always be a little bit more nimble, and there's cases where I think we need to be a little bit more nimble. We spent a substantial part of our last year working some strategic planning initiatives that had not existed before I got to the business to really look at where the business units were going, look at their horizons, and make sure that our technology and our roadmaps were lined up with those needs. So to try to get out in front, start moving out in front of that demand that's coming instead of being largely reactive to the business. So I think that's important. Interesting, we have a different configuration in our business. We have what we call embedded IT liaisons that sit with the engineers around the world on their teams. They work in the engineering labs. They work very closely with engineers to bring networking and tools into the engineering environments in a truly embedded fashion. That does 2 things. First of all, allows us to be extremely responsive to the changing needs of the engineers on the ground. But the other thing it does is it allows us to get a lot of feedback about what they're doing, where they're going, what they're thinking about. And we literally bring that back and incorporate that into our thought processes and the evolution of our services. So it's an interesting model. It probably wouldn't work in all businesses, but it works very well where you have an IT professional, many of whom have engineering degrees, sitting with the engineers in that operating environment day in and day out and getting that intel back. So that helps us stay nimble.
Great. Anyone else?
Yeah, I would say we're fairly nimble. I mean, a lot of the initiatives actually are driven by IT. We don't have a huge backlog of user-initiated projects because they're busy trying to figure out what the next style is and what's going to work. So we spend a lot of our time actually with my staff. I have them work with users to understand really what the pain points are, and we try to get in front of it. And if you look at our demographic, the average age of our company is young. It's probably in their 20s. And it used to be that when you came to work, that's where the best technology was, and you went home, you didn't have it. And it's been flipped. So there's a gulf in our company. The older people who manage, they're fine, and if they use their iPhone, it's a big deal. The younger kids come in, it's like, look, I have to use this stuff. And I always think when they get into management, whoa, hopefully I'm retired because it's going to be a big game changer. But what we've done is we've embraced mobile, embraced the BYOD policy, and did those things that we knew that would actually engage our younger user. And I think that's helped us to be nimble.
Right. So before I give you two a chance, I'm going to shift the question a bit and shift it to same thing around the operating model and being nimble enough. But how do you think the C-suite and your customer views the nimbleness of your IT organization in responding to their needs? So either one, feel free to go first.
I'll start. I think I got the best bellwether from the CEO of the company, who recently came to my office and asked if he could participate in a celebration of the team, because he thought that the team's dynamic was fantastic and how they supported acquisitions. We've done about 12 acquisitions over the last several years, and one of the things that was really important is how quickly you bring those assets in, how quickly they fold into the P&L, how quickly they get into the sales cycle, be able to do the buys and purchases. And so can we get them in and incorporated quickly enough and start really bringing that top line up as part of the process? And what he had felt is that over the last several years, we've really made a really dramatic change in how quickly and rapidly we can turn on the dime. And so that's made a really big impact for him. And a lot of the folks have really provided great support around that.
Right. No, practice makes perfect on
Absolutely.
acquisition, so it's good to have a process. Mojgan.
So I think I have a good story to tell too, in that 3 years ago, when I joined Liberty, I was sitting down with the head of claims, and he told me, Mojgan, every time we bring you guys a project, you tell me it's going to take more than a year and it's going to cost me more than $1 million. How are you going to change that? So, which was probably true, and so it was really kind of getting the team to understand that, we got to think differently. We have to make sure that we're building for fit. We're not building things that are more than what they're asking for, and so on. And so, with the claims analytics tool that I talked about, which took us 6 months, it was really, one of my goals was to show that, we can be different, and if we do it together, we can get there. Right. And so truly after that, it was kind of a success of saying we've changed the culture and we can do it differently.
Great. No, it's a great story. And working with the business around expectation setting is a big part. In the consulting world, we use the term just answer the mail, right? We always want to do more. We always want to bring our best. Mm-hmm. But answering the mail means doing what's required, right? And what's asked for, and then looking for opportunities to take it to the next step. Slightly different question. Every client I'm at, bar none, we hear a common problem from the business in that we spend 3 weeks gathering data from different sources, putting them into Excel pivot tables, and then we spend 5 minutes making a decision because that's all the time we have left. So have you seen an accelerated need for executive decision making, and how well have you equipped your business for these information-powered needs? And I'm going to start this one with Mike for a change.
Well, we had big growth internationally, and what we did first of all is we created an enterprise data model, because the business in Asia and Korea operates slightly different, and our business model in Europe is mostly wholesale, et cetera. But we created an enterprise data model because we wanted to make sure that they could execute locally, but the metrics were the same. We didn't want somebody looking at sales, and in one place it includes VAT, the other place it's net of VAT. So we wanted to make sure that everything was the same. And then we looked at, if you looked at Oracle or the normal shared everything architectures, these things couldn't scale as we started to gain volume. So we wanted to make sure that we could actually make sure we had integrity of data, but we could deliver the data quickly. It's what I call speed to insight, that we could actually process that data and get it in to the user's hands very quickly. So we looked at some alternative technologies and ended up with a columnar database, and we get about a 100x increase in the queries. And then on top of that, we've actually used a number of ways to deliver data, and not everyone wants it the same way. But we've developed, we have the normal data warehouse suite, but that's only going to be for the super users. We've actually developed a whole thing, this is years ago, on BlackBerries. So if you're a field user and you want to see what your sales are, how many people came in your store, what the conversion rate, your margins, it was all available on your BlackBerry. Because if you're on the road, you don't want to have to go to a hotel and print out stuff. And you could view it on your BlackBerry. Then we've actually extended that to dashboards that were very, very visual in nature. And what I did is actually I went out and hired a graphical designer, because dashboards look boring. And so we did a Hollywood theme, and we had our chairman, Paul Marciano, holding an Oscar, and it said Paul's Picks. And it showed a film reel, and it showed all the best sellers. And you clicked on it, and it was very, very data rich. Now the problem is I only ran in Flash, and when iPads came around, oh, that was a bummer. So then we ended up deploying this same thing on an iPad application. And it's a very, very dense application. It's about equivalent of about 16 dashboards, and they can drill down into varying degrees of depth. And it also has spatial tools so they can see what items are selling geographically. And the thing that we did is we tied the rich media. So, you know, because I always wondered, I've been in retail a long time, do those people really know what that cryptic style number represents? Well, now we have a picture and an alternate picture so they can actually see what it is. And we've had huge adoption of that. And to me, you know, getting people to adopt a data warehouse is a big issue. And we actually won the TDWI, or the Data Warehouse Institute Award for Innovation last year for that application.
How has that changed the way Guest does business? Has it changed the style of leadership, the speed at which they make decisions?
It has changed. So we actually have fewer planners now.
Okay.
And before, you know, bestsellers are a big deal because you want to see what's selling, what's not. You want to mark might if it's selling, you know, you might want to chase it, et cetera. And they would have bestseller meetings every week, but it was horrible because someone would cut and paste these pictures in the spreadsheets, and they did it at a high level, and they were, I mean, I was managing from the rearview mirror. Now they have the meetings every other week. And our chairman even said, why do you need to have them every week? You guys know what it is. You know what the best sellers are. And the thing is, now they can see them by country, they can actually see them by the store, they can drill down, and they can see them daily. So if you look at a store, I can see, well, here are the best sellers for the company, this store is different, and then I can actually merchandise differently, et cetera.
So that's an interesting perspective because that talks about moving it away from intuition, which probably was being done at those monthly meetings, much more to a data-driven decision with regard to what's in the system.
Absolutely.
What does that do for the buyers and others who had the power of intuition?
You know, some of them don't always like it.
That was an impressive story. I don't know if anybody else has something around information they want to share.
We actually have also kind of leveraged the availability of mobility. So, you know, be it the iPad or the Windows 7 and so on, and to our property risk engineers, as they go out and visit some of the sites, instead of having to wait to go back to the office to do their work, we've provided the ability that, you know, as they potentially take pictures of the building, then that can automatically be kind of uploaded into databases that then get checked against kind of models in the background, and so the pricing and rating engines in the background do the work and come back, and we can literally have the underwriters with the risk engineers kind of come back with pricing decisions to the customers within a matter of hours, if not minutes, depending on the size of the deal. And so we've taken days, things that would take days to make decisions on, to literally hours, and cutting that out and really making it much more productive. So.
Great. Next question, same topic around agility, but talking about leadership. Each of you obviously have demonstrated the leadership skills and tenacity to get to where you are, but as the IT environment changes and the needs change, how has it changed the type of talent you look for at the next level down in your organization? I'll start with Tony.
Yeah, a couple things about new leaders of today. Probably first and foremost in my team, it's about creating the proper culture, the team dynamics around the group, how people behave, really about how they operate and how they work. Being able to tell a story to our business partners around what's possible and what's achievable. I think nothing reaches a partner more than when you're able to show them a possible new future and say, wouldn't it be great if a world looked like this? And that's a really great, strong skill for our leaders to have. And so I look for team members in the leadership role to be able to tell that story to any one of our partners, whether it's in finance group, the operations team, working with the quality systems group, just being able to show them what's really achievable and possible. That's a really important skill set for us. Most folks will have the talent. They'll have the basic skill sets. Sure. It's really those additional pieces that allow them to create a great culture and tell a great story for what the future looks like.
No, the culture's a big trend we hear over and over again.
Very much a part of our book.
Yeah. Anyone else? Bill?
Yeah, I would say really the leaders on my team, I'm trying to move them towards this ability to articulate the value proposition of what they're trying to deliver, right? It's very easy for IT professionals to fall back in this mode of responding to a set of requirements for your customer, right? And at some point you got to say, wait a minute, don't give me a collection of odds and ends and items. that you're looking for. What's the value, what's the concept of operations of what we're going to develop? How's it going to change a core process in the business, and how's that going to result in value? You know, we overuse, you know, the ROI concept, but these things really do have value, these initiatives. It's not just about infrastructure, it's not just about software, it's really delivering a solution that moves a business forward. And you're going to spend a lot of resources, a lot of treasure on bringing a new process to life using a new platform or a new tool set. So it better deliver substantial value, and you better know what the objectives are before you start. So that's so important to have a leadership tier that drives that down through your business and allows the technologists to deliver to that mission. And if the top layer of leadership in IT doesn't adhere to that approach, that mindset, you're going to be more of an order taker than you are an organization that can transform the business materially.
You mentioned the word customer, which is interesting, and that's traditionally how IT has been grown up to react to the business. And we also talk about culture, and we use the term business partner. Is that customer term and dynamic still the right way for most IT organizations to think about their constituents they serve?
We don't use the word customer, and haven't since I got to Humanetics. I changed the word to business partner on the day I got there, and it was really distinguish the customer from someone who's buying from Humanetics, from the partner who we're trying to enable to great success. And so we've tried to change that language, which I think is helping some of the folks learn their responsibility, because as a partner, they have a responsibility around uplifting them as well in that process.
I think as long as you earn your way to partner, that's fair. But
you
you got
to
to earn your way to partner, right? If you're not, you're a supplier. Correct. And I agree 100%. That's the right way to look at it, is achieve that partnering status with your internal customer, your consumer, your services, and the businesses, quite frankly, that in most of our cases fund what we do.
No
At the end of the day, if we're not providing value, they're not going to put forth the funding. So, you know, we better deliver that value.
I can't actually repeat what they used to call us before I got there. So
I think the goal should also be, though, to be part of the business when possible. And true, we are a cost center where, you know, we're not always revenue generating. There are maybe small opportunities when we are, but I would say the ultimate goal is to be part of the business. And when you think of your customer, clearly there are multiple customers, but we also have to think of the end customer, whether it's the consumer, our agents and brokers, and then our internal, you know, constituents as well. Sure. So I'd say it's all. But for me, so all of what Bill said, of course. So you know, the same way that the CIO's got to be a business leader, our teams have to be business leaders. But then if you're a global organization, I'd say you want global leaders. You want people who can take into account the multiple cultures, the whole idea of distributed teams, and the ability to motivate and lead from far when needed. That's really critical as well.
Right.
When I look for leaders, it's, you know, it doesn't matter whether we're called their customers. They are customers to a sense, but I always tell my team, don't give them what they ask for, give them what they need. Yes. Because so many times we've run into problems on projects and they said, that's what they asked for. And I said, well, what problem are they trying to solve? And they, you know, scratch their head. So the leaders I look for are people that really know the business first and foremost. And when a user starts giving them requirements, it's no, I want them to ask, what problem are you trying to solve? And then half the time you find out that what you end up delivering is much, much different because now you're solving a root problem. And I think that, you know, you need people who talk business, who are, you know, respected by the business. I mean, because my tenet is, how can I solve problems with technology if I don't understand the business? Second of all, you have to have technical skills. And I always hire management with technical skills because otherwise, they're going to get snowed by the vendors. They're going to get snowed by their own employees. And you need people strong enough to actually know what's fluff and what's not fluff. And sorry, vendors, a lot of times you sell fluff. But, you know, and when you get that kind of leadership and you're providing value, you know, to solve business problems, you know, it's a good combination.
And Mike, we don't like to be called vendors. We like to be called strategic partners.
Well, but
something we have to earn to Bill's point. That's relationship status we have to earn.
Yeah, that's the evolution, right?
Yes.
It's not just a price point, right?
It's not.
Okay.
No, it's not a price point. Procurement people can call us a vendor, but everyone else needs to strategic partner. That was last year's panel, what we talked about. So this year, we'll keep focused. I'm going to shift gears, and this last group of questions is about technology. And we don't have to keep it specific to cloud, big data, or analytics. You can throw in mobility. But the key here is how are you leveraging these newer technologies to drive strategic agility in the business? And the first question is just, what's the single most impactful initiative that you've done with any of these technologies, and why was it impactful, and how did it come about? And I'm going to start with Mojgan.
So I definitely don't want to repeat kind of the claims story. So perhaps let me.
Second most impactful.
Right. Second most impactful. It's probably again around data and key performance indicators. So once again, we deal with a lot of data. We have a lot of data in a lot of systems. But it's not always very consumable by whether it's our executives or our knowledge workers or others. And so one of the projects that actually was spearheaded by our president was, to say, I've got an 80-page operational report that I get every quarter, and I have to sit for hours in the executive room with my leadership team and go through that. So I want to get this down to like the kind of 5 or 6 most important graphs that when I can look at it, I know what's happening to the premium, what's happening to my loss ratio, my expense ratio, and so on. And so it was truly leveraging, first of all, the organization of the team, having people from claims and underwriting and actuarial and finance involved in the project, and then of course leveraging all of the kind of data tools that we have, be it SAS or Teradata and other tools, and then really deciding what are the key questions that we want to answer, because that's really where you want to start, instead of saying, let's come up with this list of reports, but say, what are the questions that we want to answer? And then agreeing that these are the 10 questions that we want to answer, and then prioritizing them, because again, we can't do everything in the length of time. And then again, in a span of a short period of 6 to 9 months, really coming up with a set of reports that then, in order for it to be consumable, using some visualization tools that made it much nicer looking and actually makes the project more impactful. And so delivering that, and so I'd say that's where we went from bringing hordes of data in and then really bringing it down to what was needed and answering the question that the business was looking for.
Anyone else?
Yeah, I just kind of an interesting, for us, it's this notion of a privatized cloud and the design tools set up as a grid globally. So engineers can run simulation jobs at any hour of the night, anywhere on the globe, and get fast response and results so that they can continue to iterate through their circuit design to meet our tape out schedules. Where we've seen that, where we've seen the benefit of getting better and faster and more live with that global grid is when we buy smaller companies. So we'll buy a company, maybe 150 engineers, and they're used to having, servers under desks or in the closet in the business, and they're trying to get time on the machines. They can't get fast enough servers because, they're on a tight budget as a small business. We bring them in, fully integrate them into the grid literally over the weekend. So Monday morning they come in and they're operating on this global grid, and they just kind of go, my gosh, it's 10 times as fast as it was. It's available, and I don't have to worry about clearing out a queue or moving data around. It just happens for me mysteriously, and I can do the job of engineering. So we've seen, as we brought in smaller companies that maybe don't have that agility, they're locked into their small infrastructure, kind of thrive in that kind of environment, and that reassures us that these investments are really, really worthwhile to get max productivity out of the organization.
Great.
Yeah, I talked about the iPad BI application. That's probably the most impactful. But another one that we did was we have a product lifecycle management system, and it's used really from concept to purchase order to actually gather all the information about a garment and to bring in the whole supply chain and communicate those specs to a manufacturer to develop it. And then we ended up noticing that in our wholesale part of the business, they have a thing called classrooms where everybody comes from around the world. They look, and even though we have a big line, they figure out what's going to be sold to which countries or which customers. And I found out they were doing that with spreadsheets. And we never really got involved in that part of the business, but I was appalled. So we had a meeting, and I said, look, you've got all this master data sitting in the PLM system. We can extend that to the whole, to the marketing side. You know, you have high-res images, and so we loaded them in the database, and we ended up creating an application that, you know, we put 2D barcodes inside the samples, so they could range them, and with a little scanner, just scan the items, and it created a whole line sheet, which it would take them literally probably 1,000 hours across all the different regions every quarter, or maybe a couple thousand, and they could do it in seconds. And then it created a beautiful report, or they could actually email that or email a link to their customers so they could see. And so this really took this outdated process, automated it, but made it so much better. And then now we're extending the application so they can take orders directly on the spreadsheet, on the iPad.
So was this in anyone's strategic plan, or did this just happen by chance?
No, this stumbled up because I'll tell you what happened. A query didn't work, and the guy calls me up, this French guy, the system does not work. And I said, like, what are you talking about? And he explains this query, and it's like, called my guy, what query? He goes, well, they asked for it. We don't know what it's for. So I dug into it, and I found out they were doing all these spreadsheets, and I said, hey, guys, this is a project. Let's fix this. And ended up being pretty impactful. And the first iteration was about 8,000 lines of code. Now it's probably 50,000 lines of code, because as they saw it, it was like, wow, we can do this, and we just kept adding and iterating to it. But it's been a real game changer.
It brings up a great example of just how to embrace innovation from different parts, right? It doesn't always have to be in our plan, and sometimes it comes from the field, comes from a division or anywhere in the organization. So, great story.
Many times it's not in the plan.
Yes,
right?
Yes, very much so. Anyone else on that topic?
We're just entering our phase of data warehousing at Haemonetics, so we're early on. But we did embrace mobility early on. We do support the iOS devices. We have seamless VPN. We've got a couple of warehouses that we just recently put up for the quality measurement for our systems, where we're trying to see how many infant mortality failures we have in the field and how well the devices are actually working in the field. And they were unable to see that in any way in the prior model. So we created that small warehouse, put it through the iPads, and allowed them to get ubiquitous anywhere they were. And that really started the firestorm. So now we have a 3-year program underway for metadata management, getting all of our data aligned, because there's a lot of homework to do to get data in a place where you can actually use it in that kind of consolidated way.
Great. No, that's great. Next question, and we talked a little bit about this when we met earlier, the evolving role of the CIO as we move to more of these just-in-time projects, just-in-time services, software as a service, cloud, and other things. And not saying it's becoming easier, it's becoming more complex, if anything. But how do you see your roles changing with all of these evolving and emerging technologies? And why don't we start with Bill this time?
Yeah, I think it is getting far more challenging. I think all of us have to manage a broader portfolio, right? So none of us are empowered to have as much headcount as we would be comfortable with deep expertise across all the areas of technology that we're responsible for, right? Every year we're rolling out, BI and analytics, and now we have to have cloud expertise, and a few years ago it was CRM, and we don't leave much of that stuff behind, quite frankly. We keep carrying it with us. So the breadth of IT organizations in the engagement, whether you're dealing with a manufacturing facility, a warehouse, HR systems, and human capital, we're carrying resources that need to be, to some degree, expert in the processes associated with all of those fields. So we have to build virtual teams of resources that we can count on, supplier partners that we trust, that we have continuous relationships that can bring in expertise and bring in resources really at the drop of a hat when we need to spin up projects to do that kind of work. So one of the things I continue to work with my team was, can we build those virtual resources to be a much broader community of interest on behalf of the company? The challenges come in when we start talking about things we were talking about earlier, like cloud, okay? Well, it sounds great. I'll just go park my data somewhere else and be able to take care of that. But they're very complex agreements to negotiate and to leverage. If any of you in the audience have tried to negotiate SLAs with a cloud supplier lately, you'll look like me and you'll be a little thin on the back from pulling your hair out. You can't get committed service levels anywhere near the committed service levels that we would bring to our own internal customers in the organization. And then if you even get a little bit more robust and try to negotiate the legal agreements, you know, for disclosure of information or gross negligence for SaaS providers that are managing your data in the cloud, good luck getting that legal terminology built into the contract to where you have any teeth. So for us as leaders in IT, as CIOs, it's not enough just to say, gee, that seems like an attractive technology. I got to operationalize it. I got to operationalize it with real partners, real SLAs, and real legal terminology that will allow me to comfortably engage. So I think we're going to continually be challenged as leaders in this space to be able to build those kind of complex relationships fast enough for the business to take advantage of new opportunities.
Great. Anyone else?
Yeah, I think the role is definitely getting much more complex. And you know, we've worked so long to actually put together master data, clean up data and stuff. And now you've got, you know, cloud, I think on one hand, it offers a tremendous amount of flexibility. And if you look at things like e-commerce, you know, you can't survive without it. But then in other areas, you have people coming and trying to sell directly into the business, and they're selling about how easy it's going to be. You look, you know, no IT involvement, just go throw it in. Well, everything needs data. That data's got to go somewhere, and it needs a level of integration. And then when it doesn't work, they blame you. Well, where were you? So I think that that's actually making things a lot more complex. And while it can go and, you know, give you advantages from, you know, the capital savings and, you know, the speed to entry, but it creates complexity and integration. Because at the end of the day, if you start having replicated data across the enterprise, it creates much bigger problems.
Great.
I actually argue, though, that it's been complex all along. Maybe it's getting more complex just because of the volume and the different sources, but I think it's been complex all along. I think, you know, for years we've read, well, a CIO is a business leader, and at least we've been saying it. It may not necessarily have been true, but you know, I sometimes feel that some of what we read and what we hear is, part of it is true and part of it is hype, and so it's kind of separating some of that. And
Sure. No, it's always been complex. I mean, you integrate with vendors, but it's getting more complex because I think it's proliferating.
Right, right. But then we've had our business people who've been building systems, you know, forever. Even if they weren't buying it from vendors, they were building it, and, you know, we were discovering.
Yeah, well, I call that cockroach technology. You turn out the lights, you don't know how it got there. But.
Well, my thoughts on this is that we do embrace a lot of the, as we call it, cloud services or software as a service inside of Humanetics. We're a relatively small shop, and so we need to leverage that expertise where we can get it. And what we've done to try to lessen the blow is we do try to make sure that we're engaged in each one of the programs, whether it's Concur, whether it's Taleo for the pieces that we're doing for recruiting, or whichever application that's currently in question. Salesforce.com, obviously an obvious one. We have an SSO strategy that allows us to do all of our assertions inside, so we know who's who in the pew when they're using the cloud system, and we try to make sure that we get those metadata aligned so that we actually have things aligned with our internal systems, and that's where the complexity comes in. We've been fortunate in that our partners want to work with us in that space, so we've been able to kind of get in front of some of that as it's come in. I think most of them have a good level of maturity. I mean, most of them will know that there's no real easy ride, right? Something has to happen for it to work well. And we've been able to get in front of most of that. I think the challenge comes into play is that now as more and more of it's leaving, trying to measure the operational risk. How much operational risk do you have within your business model of what if something goes down? Because at the end of the day, if the Salesforce system goes down, maybe it doesn't impact the team immediately, but 3 days down the road, when we're trying to do a lead gen and someone's trying to figure out what quota is going to be, it's going to be an ugly process. If you lose some of your recruiting up front, maybe it's not as critical an error. But if you're trying to use your major ERP system out there and you've got that as a service model and you can't transact any product that week and you can't ship around the US or worldwide, it's a bad day in the office, right? So we're trying to figure out where the risk plays and where it makes sense.
Okay. Thank you all. We're going to open it up to the audience, and I know you've all had a good 45, 50 minutes to think of some challenging questions for our panelists. So I expect everybody to run all at once down to the 2 microphones we have in the front of the room. The first one's always the hardest, so thank you, sir.
Yes,
Please let us know who you are, and feel free to ask the question to a specific panelist or the group.
My name's Gary Garber. I'm CIO of Boston Private Bank. And we spent a lot of time talking about the significance and importance of technology on the overall business and competitiveness of the business. So my question is related to the board, the CEO, and want to get some feedback as to what their level of interest is in many of the issues we've discussed, what their expertise and level of understanding is related to those issues, and then what you've done to increase transparency of some of the multitude of issues and challenges that we face here.
Perfect, thank you. Anybody want to go first on that one?
I got 2 thoughts on that one.
Okay.
First of all, with regard to the CEO and the engagement, a little funny story, first of all. I was probably at Humanetics for maybe about 4 months, and I got a call from the FBI in Boston that said, hey, by the way, it looks like you're getting attacked overseas with regard to what's going on your internet. So would you please take a look at a couple of IP addresses for us and take a peek for us? And please don't actually do anything other than see if they're hitting inside, which, of course, resulted in an event and having a discussion with the CEO. But actually, that was a great event because it allowed us to talk about security and what we need to do with the environment and how we need to make changes. And that really piqued his interest. It got him to thinking about what's all this IT stuff that's all hanging around there, which led us to several other stories and other discussions. Ultimately, it ended with a prototype that we built for the overall sales reporting activity, which we demonstrated for him in earnest probably about 3 months ago. And when he saw it, he just completely dropped dead and said, this is fantastic. You really drill in all the way through sales allocations right down to the rep level. He says, we have got to push this forward very quickly. So in a really strange way, this odd event that occurred up front led us to this other dialogue right at the senior level where he's excited about what's happening.
So take note, strategic method of getting meeting with CEO is have friend in FBI, call up.
Yeah, I would say, having worked with a couple of different boards over the years, one of the challenge in working with boards is most of these board members sit on numerous boards of directors, right? So their visibility is a very broad range of companies and institutions, and they each have their own horror stories in what's happened somewhere else. There was a DR meltdown, something happened, a storm, and the business they sat on the board for didn't recover, or there's an ERP nightmare or a cyber attack. And so what you get is the sum total of all the board member experiences on disasters in their past profile, and they want to make sure that we're covering on all of those fronts. And they're valid questions, and they're appropriate questions to ask, but it requires a lot of time and energy to kind of explain, how you're doing and where you're covering those bets. And of course, you don't get a lot of time over target with board presentations. So you have to be very succinct and very explicit in explaining your case. So it's a real challenge, and I think we'll continue to face that and hopefully to be able to alleviate a lot of those fears or go work issues that are brought up by the board as necessary.
Yeah.
I'd say also leverage the relationship that you have with your CEO to perhaps sometimes get in front of a couple of the board members who've got interest in specific topics. So we've got a session going with a couple of our board members who are very interested in security. So we're doing a session just for that, for those 2 board members outside of the overall board meetings that we do. So I say that's another way to get in front of them with different topics.
Great.
Do any of your boards, I guess, in each of these companies have anyone with any IT experience or background? Because that is something that's been talked about in the press quite a bit. But yours?
Perfect. Thank you. We have another gentleman with a question.
Hi, Rodrigo Martinez, MBA candidate. You talk about providing value, delivering value. There are some project initiatives that are easy to justify. When you, for instance, try to reduce cost. But you talk also about social media, innovation, collaboration. So I would like to know how you link that to return on investment.
Sure, please.
Yeah, I'll start with that. Yeah, clearly, if you're working on, for example, supply chain initiatives, right? They're a lot easier to quantify ROI and return in supply chain types of activities because you've got all these definitive costed factors of production in the supply chain. So in those areas, it's pretty clear. You talk about something like social media. The way we go about that is we look at, for example, the people we attract to the workforce. We're looking for the best and the brightest engineers that we can attract, the most creative people. A part of that is the environment that you operate in and you allow them to operate in. So if you can provide them with a tool-rich environment, maybe they come out of the best universities, they've got tremendous networks and resources where they come from, and they expect that to translate into their workforce environment. And if you're a California company, they'll go work for the company next door if the environment is more conducive to their creative juices than your environment. So there are ways of trying to size that up and decide what you're going to offer and how much you're going to invest in that. I'm not sure it's a quantitative assessment, but it certainly has value that you can overall assess in terms of getting the right talent in your business.
If it is not quantitative, it's difficult to measure, how you measure success in that case?
I think you have to look at, are you achieving the goals? If your goals are to attract the brightest students from the brightest universities, you track how you're doing against that, you get feedback, you interview those students and new employees as they come in, and you incorporate that feedback into how you're doing with your recruiting.
Yeah.
It's imprecise, but it is a way of getting that feedback and seeing if it works.
Any others want to comment on that topic?
Yeah, go ahead.
No, but if you look, social media, to me it's a form, especially for a retailer, it's a form of advertising. And just think back in the days of print advertising, you did full-page spreads in magazines, and you really had no way to measure the effectiveness. I mean, one way you're promoting the brand, and if you didn't do it, sales might drop, but you really couldn't measure the effect on sales. And with social media, it's very similar. But you have to look, let's say in our case, I guess, our demographics in their early 20s. Now, if we didn't do social media, we wouldn't be relevant. So it's, while it's hard to measure maybe the positive impact, it's tougher to measure, what's the negative if you don't do it? You won't be relevant. But compared to, let's say, the print example, it's actually easier to measure because you can see how many impressions you get, you can see how many people click through to your website, how many convert. And then I think there's another opportunity which we're doing some work on, and I don't want to say too much because of privacy issues, but it's really the concept of, if you look at Facebook, that's the world's largest database of individual preferences and likes, and it's self-maintaining. And think about it, if you start a CRM or a loyalty program, you have to go and entice people and give them goodies to give you a little bit of information, and it's all temporal. And then if you want it updated, you have to give them some kind of incentive. And Facebook, they do it for you. And think of it, if you could actually match that with their purchase behavior, and the micro-segmentation possibilities are enormous. So I think that, to me, but there's privacy issues. But using Facebook Connect and trying to tie it to transactions and use Facebook as the CRM database, I think can have a tremendous amount of ROI.
Yeah. Perfect. We have one more question over here, please.
Hi, I'm Gagan Sandhu. I work for Akamai Technologies. My question is specifically about, some of you mentioned in this talk that, there is a level of distrust between management, business side and IT. Either distrust or not as much, so to speak, a goodwill, as you said, business setting up their own small or big projects, external vendors coming in and doing demos directly to business, and IT is like, where were you when we were doing this, right? So I'm sure all of us in this room have gone through, in some stages, for that process. How do you overcome that? How do you improve on that? And more at the ground level, does it start at the top, at the bottom, somewhere in between? Does it start with some, happy hour sessions or big unconferences? So just want to know your thoughts on that.
Well, we really don't have too much of that problem because we try to stay engaged with the business. And I think when they do go and do their own things or get sold directly by vendors, it's because the business feels they aren't being serviced and you're not providing that level of service. So, to me, once the sheep's out of the barn, how do you put it back? I'm not sure. Where I work, we pretty much, I wouldn't say prevented it, but have really tried to stay close to the business and make sure that we're always invited when a vendor comes in and we're always part of the process. Yeah. And it doesn't mean that you can't always say no. Sometimes you have to accept something that you don't like, but I'd rather be a less than willing participant than at home and not invited to the party.
Yeah. Others on that topic?
So for us, this has happened in the past. I mean, I can't say, I haven't been with the company for 9 years, and I'm not saying if I were that, the problem wouldn't exist, but in general, to overcome it, I think it is that probably their needs weren't being met, so they went out and solved it. And in some cases, they realized that they probably didn't solve it as well as if they'd come to the IT group. So it's really understanding what they're looking for and then making sure you deliver and that they look at you as their partner and someone who's going to get them what they want.
Yeah, I would say that what I've found historically is it's not so much a distrust. If you have true distrust, you got a bigger problem.
Yeah, much bigger problem.
You got a much bigger problem, and if you don't get that under control, your successor is going to deal with it. Okay, so I don't use it. What it is often a function of kind of pent up demand, right? How come you can't get to my project? How come that's not funded right now? It's important to me, and a lot of times there needs to be that intimacy and that dialogue and that constant interchange. It says, well, here's what's really going on in the business, and here are the priorities, and it's not that your project, isn't interesting or isn't important, but it's, here's what's going on at the decision level across the management team and the company. So I find it's usually a frustration with pent-up demand more than it is a distrust.
Perfect. Perfect. We're out of questions from the audience, and we're conveniently out of time, or except Lindsay, please.
Okay, so Gartner is predicting in 2017 that the CMO is going to be spending more on IT services than the IT folks. Can you care to comment on that?
The who?
The Chief Marketing Officer.
Chief Marketing Officer.
It's going to spend more than IT. They're going to get more of your budget than you are.
Mm-hmm. I'm very well aware of that. And when I heard that, I said, over my dead body.
And someone was arranging that? Is that?
No, but actually I think it can be true, because if you think about, and in the same study says the CMO and the CIO should be best friends. Mm-hmm. Because what's happening, if you look at CMOs before, they kind of operated in a little silo. Let me go off, I'm going to send out so many mailers, I get the results, and it was very, very, very contained operation. Now, everything's tied to POS, to e-commerce, to loyalty programs, and they don't always understand. Some vendor will come and pitch our CMO, and she says, this is great, and then, well, that requires a POS mod, and quite frankly, we got to go and change the website. And we can do all this, and it's like, oh, really? And I think that if, they don't really understand IT. So I think that's true. That will happen if they don't have a good partnership with the CIO.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of that money won't be spent well.
Anyone else on the topic?
I think it's a lot of retail.
Yeah,
It's
very,
embedded
very
a lot.
retail-centric.
Yeah, embedded a lot in the retail space.
Perfect. Well, thank you, Lindsay, for the question. We are out of time. You've been a wonderful, attentive audience and a great panel, and I want to thank everybody.